Welcome back to the Zero Lab podcast. I am Tom Hellkamp, joined by my co-hosts Max Johnson and Austin Swain. And this is our glorious return. I know it's been a while, but we are excited to get back into this. We took a long break over the fall and the winter, but it's spring again, and it's time for the Zero Lab to make its glorious return. So here we are with episode 9, the relaunch. Today we're going to be talking about the results of the Utrecht Special Event that happened in Europe this past weekend. We're going to be talking about a post-rotation tier list, looking at some Japanese results and some of the deck lists that are doing well over there, as well as the Champions League Fukuoka, I think that's how you say it, results and deck lists from their top 16. Then we'll be talking about some of our own post-rotation thoughts as we've gotten into some preliminary testing for EUIC, which will be happening at the beginning of April. And then we'll be taking a look at some newly revealed cards from the next Japanese set, Crimson Haze, which comes out, I believe, the same weekend as our Temporal Forces set. So just in about 2 or 3 weeks here.
I actually did not realize that Crimson Haze comes out that soon in Japan. It feels like we don't know anything about it yet.
I know, it's crazy, but we don't need to know that much. We know about the Ursa Luna, which I guess
we
will
do
get
know
to.
about. Yeah, the Ursa Luna is going to be nutty. Radiant Charizard too. Am I right?
Yeah, but now everyone gets to use him, which is cool.
Everyone gets to use him, exactly.
With a Radiant Greninja still in your deck.
That's busted.
Yeah. So we'll get to all of that later in the episode, but for now we are going to transition over to looking at the Utrecht results that happened in Europe recently. So, surprise, surprise, Mew VMAX won in Europe. Nobody's surprised. But, you just can't believe that they let it happen again, especially going up against a Dark-type deck in the finals against that Roaring Moon.
It's actually crazy. You'd think just on paper, like, oh, that's a great matchup for Roaring Moon. But it turns out Roaring Moon bricks really hard, kind of, if you just judge them sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Mew just, that's just the thing Mew does. They're going to disrupt your hand, and then they're going to just go boom, 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 you lose.
Yeah. I think it was really interesting, too, to see Owen. I mean, Mew always wants to go first, because it has to evolve before it can really attack. I suppose with the Alessa Sparkle, and I'll pull up the deck list here, and so we can view it as an image. He did play 2 Alessa Sparkle. I guess he was playing the Fusion build, so you can go second, and he could get a 2-prize KO turn 1. But I think he chose second more likely just because Roaring Moon wants to go first. And so he felt like if he could go second and judge path, or get the turn 2 or turn 1 going second, Alessa Sparkle 2-prize KO, that would put him way ahead of what is probably normally not a great matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I remember there was that event a couple weeks ago where it was a Mew player beat like 7 Roaring Moon and Charizard like combined in their run. It's just ridiculous. The deck refuses to die, and the only thing that will take it down is rotation.
Yeah, that's true.
I think if this isn't clear evidence of that, I don't know what evidence could possibly exist that, Max, exactly what you said is how it is. This deck just refuses to die, and I think it's going to go down as one of the most powerful decks in all of Pokemon trading card game history.
Yeah, one thing I will take pride in, though, is, unless I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but I don't remember Mew VMAX winning in North America in at least the last year, right?
I saw a tweet, I believe it was from Rahul Reddy, and he tweeted out the tournaments that Mew had won. I believe it won in North America once since its release, but it won once. Some places, like some countries, it won twice, and then in Europe it won 7 times. So pretty crazy. The Europeans love their Mew.
Has Mew? There's no way Mew VMAX has only won Worlds, though, right? That can't possibly be right.
No, sorry. It's won a ton of stuff. Like, I'm just saying it only won one
major
event in North America.
Really?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. I mean, it's had a lot of top 8s.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of finishes and stuff, but not that many major wins.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's wild
so
to think about. Well,
Owen breaking out the Fusion Mew for maybe one last ride. I guess we have Vancouver as well before rotation, so maybe we'll see the Mew Renaissance.
Oh,
Mew strikes back.
the Mew heads will be out in full force for their last ride. I can guarantee that.
yeah, that's probably true. If you have been trying to decide whether or not to cut the Spiritomb, probably don't cut it right now.
Or play a dark deck. Although that didn't get
That
Filippo
may
quite
not be enough.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll take a look at Filippo's second place deck, playing that Roaring Moon, which has obviously picked up steam ever since Ross Cawthon got top 8. I believe it was in Charlotte. And I think one interesting thing out of this finalist deck from Filippo was we saw 4 Pokemon Catcher, 4 Trekking Shoes, and I think there was, if I'm not mistaken, in some lists there was like sometimes like 2 Trekking Shoes, maybe 2 or 3 Pokemon Catcher, but he went the full 4-4, but only 2 Earthen Vessel. I can't remember again Ross's exact 60, and I haven't put that much time into Moon myself. But I do know that Ross didn't play the water energies either, and Filippo did play 2 water energies, so technically he could Moonlight Shuriken at some point. And to me, that does seem like the best way to play it. I don't think if you're going to be playing the full 4 energy switch, I actually don't really see any reason not to play some water energy just on the off chance that you're able to pull that play off. I played in a League Cup this weekend against a Roaring Moon player, and I was playing Lost Box, and he had beat Gardevoir in top 8 to get to top 4 because he was able to Moonlight Shuriken turn 1 both games.
Yes.
And
Interesting.
I was very scared of that playing Lost Box because I did not play Manaphy. I was like, this is normally a good matchup, but if he gets the turn 1 Moonlight Shuriken, I am far behind.
That I played him in round 1 and I got donked by the Greninja. It killed 2 Charmanders.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad.
So yeah, I was like, man, why aren't more people playing this? I kind of actually, I think the list I was seeing before were like a lot of people were playing 3 waters. I actually really like the 2 waters. Like you run the risk of prizing one, like if you want to get the playoff. But I feel like the Greninja play is like kind of just like a side like bonus thing that can be really nice to pull off.
Right.
And then
It's
it like
definitely
still having the 8 dark energies makes it so like you're still gonna like find enough dark energies to get that turn 1 attack in most cases.
right. The thing is, of the Greninja in Moon is very, very, very situational. There's a lot of matchups where you don't need to think about it at all. But those matchups where it is really good, it's absolutely insanely good.
Yeah.
If you
And
can get it, you can
I
get
also
that
think
play.
it's like that surprise factor because Ross didn't play the waters, so people assume that people are playing Ross's list. And so because Moon wants to go second, they're not going to see whether you have water energy in your deck or not unless you mulliganed and had it in that hand. And so they're probably not going to prioritize getting Manaphy down turn 1 if it's something like Gardevoir or Lost Box uh, or Charizard. If you chose to go second, they're probably not prioritizing Manaphy. They're trying to prioritize everything else that they need to do to set up. And so you can really cripple their board state if you're able to get that off turn 1. It asks
Right.
for a lot to get there, but it's very powerful when you can do it, and it's I think it's more consistent to get there than people think.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to clarify as well, I'm taking a look at the Ross list from, uh, let's see, which tournament was this from? From Charlotte, and I can confirm it plays only 3 Trekking Shoes, 9 Dark Energies. There's no Pokemon catchers, so pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Definitely some deviations from the Ross list. However, especially from the Pokemon lineup, heavy inspiration and you know, 4 of everything that you would expect.
Yeah, I feel like Pokemon catchers, it always comes up at like the tail end of a format where someone takes a current archetype and was like, what if we jammed 4 catchers in there? I remember last format, the end of the D block era, there was the Arcadura list that was like, wow, catchers is kind of cool in this deck. That a lot of like I think Grant Shen was playing that
dude,
deck.
I don't even want to talk about that. I got boomed by an Arcdura at the last tournament of that format, Fort Wayne. when ironically you were the champion, I was fighting for top 32. And I was playing Mew against Arcturo, which is normally a great matchup, and he just Pokemon catchered 3 times, hitting heads for my Genesect.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't know. Just the Pokemon catchers, just they always rear their head at the end of a format. It's kind of funny, and they've been seeing a lot of success in the Moon list.
Yeah.
yeah, we were seeing some success with Pokemon catchers in Maridon, not too long ago either. Here, that was maybe a month ago.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Azul posted a list of a current standard Maridon list over the weekend, saying that this is what he'd play if he played Maridon in the current standard format, and he was playing I think 2 or 3 Pokemon catchers in it. And I had sent you guys a list too the other day of Chimpao just cutting the cross switchers for Pokemon catchers. I also think that there's like a piece of it where
Yeah.
like there are some cross switcher stands out there, but I don't think a lot of people are gonna like argue that it's so annoying to play cross switcher, especially in Chimpao to me when you're playing Barrel, and if you don't have the second cross switcher, like you're just so mad that the first one's in your hand.
Yeah. No, I like the Pokemon catchers. I think they. I feel like it was always kind of an underutilized card. Like how the gust on an item is so strong. Obviously, it's just is it people have a hard time like getting over the coin flip, which sure playing
Yeah,
coin flip cards isn't always nice, but it's such a powerful effect when you do flip heads. Like makes sense
Yeah.
to include it in some decks.
yeah,
This is, the Pokemon catchers is definitely one of those things where if you say, right, I'm going to play 2, if you play the numbers game out to its logical end, that means that at least one of those Pokemon catchers on average is going to just straight up be a boss, which is very powerful, obviously. The question is going to be, are you going to flip heads? Are you going to be able to play that and get the heads at the moment that you actually need it? That's kind of the bigger question.
yeah. We won't have to worry about that for too much longer though, with Prime Catcher coming out.
That's true.
But moving on into the top 4, I think the most surprising deck, maybe of the format, Tord Reklev with I don't even know what to call this.
Yeah, let's dive into this for
And I
sure.
don't even know if the whole thing will not fit on one screen. So that is, let's see. There we go. Now I can get it to just barely fit, just barely. So a 2/2 Charizard line, and then a 1/1/1/1 of everything else for his Pokemon. I believe there's something like, well, I guess we can look at the limitless thing. 22 Pokemon, and 5 of those are evolutions. So it's like 17 basic Pokemon.
Yeah. You're probably not going to be mulliganing a whole lot with a deck like this. I think this deck is really interesting for a number of reasons because theoretically it has an answer to, well, I guess everything. But of course, the big thing about a deck like this is that no one has any idea what is going on. And so no one's really going to be playing very optimally against a list like this on a weekend, on a big tournament weekend like this. I mean, I don't think anyone can honestly say that they have played against this deck before until maybe now.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And I mean, what do you do when you see a Charmander come down? You assume you're playing against Charizard, and then you see like a Bidoof come down. So you're like, okay, it's Charizard Pidgeot, but with a Barrel, and then like
The rapid strike Sobble
Sobble
comes
comes down. Then you're like, what the heck is going on? And I just have to wonder, and I don't know if Tord tweeted about this. I don't know if any of you saw it. I just want to know how many of his games were won via tempting trap and quick shooting, just for like 100 turns.
I did see he did make a tweet that he won one game because he tempting trap quick shooted for 44 turns straight.
Jeez.
That sounds correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
let's
I
be
just-
honest. It makes sense.
Yeah, tempting trap Mawile is pretty strong right now. It's saw a lot of success in the past couple of regionals. And it's like kind of like one of those cards that like it's kind of like a meta call. Like either everyone's teching against it or no one's respecting it. And if you catch everyone when they're not respecting it, it can get a lot of value.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. But Max, I'm
The thing
surprised
about-
you haven't even mentioned yet that
Dude,
your
the boss, the
favorite,
Thornton.
the Thornton.
the Thornton.
It was so
Huge.
sick. He made some sick plays with the Thornton on stream and just like turned one of his like random support Pokemon into a Charmander so he can Infernal Rain onto it. That's just such a cool use of Thornton. Um, really, really strong. You know, takes like a Rotom or a Lumineon off your board.
Hmm.
Uh,
And turns it
yeah,
into a
it
330 HP Charizard EX.
just wild. It's just this is the second time this season that Tord has just built like an absolutely broken deck that no one saw coming because there was that Tord box that he
Hmm.
built with like the Iron Hands and the Roaring Moon Lost box.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wow, that was a crazy deck. That was really cool. And then people started picking it up, and it's kind of a semi-popular archetype now. It's not very. I think that's what you played to the cup this weekend, wasn't it, Tom? Something very similar to that.
I played that. I played his version with Giratina for a couple of months. I've since switched to more of like a turbo build, but yeah, it was a very fun deck, and I the reason I liked it was especially the Giratina version. I made some changes. I didn't play the Kyogre specifically locally. I didn't feel like Kyogre was super useful, um, but I just felt like it didn't have any bad matchups. It was favored or even into pretty much everything as long as you could play it correctly.
Yeah, it's just insane. Like he has like Sanders up there for me, but Tord has to be the greatest deck builder like
Yeah,
of the modern era for sure. He just I don't know how you can roll up with this deck and just body at a major, but yeah, just really cool to see like what like one of the greatest players like in the game like can do.
yeah, absolutely. And it makes me really interested to see what he'll roll up to EUIC with because Gardevoir's gone. Maybe he'll be able to figure out Gardevoir post rotation. I guess I have my doubts, just having tried some games with new Gardevoir. And it and you know maybe he'll just roll up with like a standard Charizard list or something. But I hope we see something pretty crazy from Tord at EUIC.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I would count on it.
I think there's a lot of possibility that a lot of these new cards that are going to be coming out open up some doors that I think are going to be really cool. So I agree. I think something big's coming. We may not know what it is yet,
Yeah,
but when we see it, it's
well,
going to be
no,
one of those moments. We're going to remember it.
absolutely. Moving on through the rest of the top eight, then we have top four was Champao. I think it was a pretty standard list. We saw the four cross switchers, no canceling clone. It might have even been uh, the same list that won the prior European regional card for card. I'm pretty sure.
It looks like it is.
But
This
except
one
the
has the
collect
collect Frigi.
Frigivax, yeah. Was it Owen Cameraman that one with the Chimpao said? I think he said that he didn't realize there was another Frigivax now, and that's
Yeah,
why
I
he
think it
didn't
had
play
like
it.
just come out.
Yeah. Um, so Chimpao doing well in this format. It sort of disappeared for a while, and has come back. And I think there's some interesting things about that too. Is we saw Goldengo kind of come back a little bit, Chimpao come back a little bit. Two decks that are expected to be very good in the next format, and I think some people are just starting to look at them in this format because they are playable and pretty good in this format. Chimpao much better in this format than Goldengo, I think. But both of them getting really big boosts into the next format, and people maybe just have an interest in revisiting them now because they plan to play them more maybe in the next format. So
Definitely.
What was so with Chi and Pao kind of falling off this format? That was primarily due to sort of what was it, Iron Hands pressure and path pressure? Was that kind of the big two deals
I
I
think
for it?
think really like one of the big things that like kind of hurt Chi and Pao, it was like kind of like seeing a lot of play like early on was when Guardy started playing double Avery.
mhm.
That like really killed like
Oh,
Chi
sure.
and
Yeah,
Pao's like
yeah.
viability in the meta.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
it was.
so long ago. I forget that that was the standard way to build it.
Yeah, it also I think had a pretty horrendous rapid strike matchup because they would just devo your Excaliburs.
Right.
Um, so there was like because this format has stretched on for, man, we're into month 5 of this format now, um, and we've had a lot of ups and downs. I think at the start, like around LAIC time, the big thing that hurt it was the Averys and Guardy, and then we saw a rise in Rapid Strike, and Rapid Strike was really bad for it. Um, and as well as like I think Stall kind of hit its peak around like San Antonio, and and Stall I don't think was an awesome matchup for Chien Pao either. Um,
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be.
yeah, and then Gardy started cutting the Averys. Rapid Strike disappeared because of the rise of Moon, and Miraidon had kind of disappeared as well because it had a pretty bad Charizard matchup. And Miraidon was sort of 50-50, but it was kind of like you would lose if you started Chien Pao against it, so you needed to start a non-two-prizer. So there was like a lot
Yeah,
of things that have happened in this format. But I think it was always like an okay deck. It just had some really bad matchups that got more popular like in the middle of the format.
sure. Makes sense.
Moving on, we'll just quickly stop through the rest of the top 8. We saw 2 Charizards. One of them is the normal Pidgeot Zard that we always see. That was the 7th place list. But the 5th place list we'll look at quickly is the TM Evo Charizard Barrel deck, which has seen a lot of play in Japan in the next format, and saw a little bit of play in our format around LAIC, but disappeared pretty quickly after that. So it's interesting to see this get a top 8 here in one of the last tournaments of this format.
Yeah, pretty cool to see. I think going to the next format that Bibzard is pretty strong. I always felt like it was maybe a little bit underrated in this format. Like, it's nice. It makes like some of your like tougher matchups like Giratina, which is kind of like 50-50-ish. I think Bibzard has just like a little bit of a better matchup into that since they can't like boss KO your Pidgeot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Um,
that's actually a huge deal.
yeah, for
Huge
sure.
deal.
Uh, but I think like the problem with Bibzard is if you don't like hit a battle VIP on your first turn, like it can be kind of hard to like get going.
Yeah.
Um, but that's an issue next format because we have Buddy Poffin. So if you miss the turn 1 VIP, you got the turn 2 Buddy Poffin.
Yeah. I
Right.
don't think people have realized, we've started a little bit of our testing for the next format. And I didn't fully realize, and I don't think and the entire community has fully realized yet how good Buddy Poffin is. When you start to play a deck, like if you just get one of your main attackers down in this format, you can actually kind of get going on your second turn if you are able to find a Buddy Poffin. But like in this current format, if you have to go first as Charizard and you just like bench Charmander, Pidgey, pass, or just like Charmander, pass, you're struggling for the rest of the game. And if you top deck a VIP, you're just like livid. And in the next format, when you top deck Buddy Poffin, you're just like so hyped. It's so cool.
Yeah,
It's
super strong card. Like it's gonna be like a super strong staple, like format like defining card.
Yeah.
Like cards that can use Buddy Poffin like are gonna do pretty well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
definitely.
Um, so
Got
just to
the
mention
Pidgeot stall too.
the final 2 decks were Pidgeot, Stall, and Giratina. So we can take a quick look at the Pidgeot. Um, Obviously, a little bit different than the Snorlax Stall. This is a deck that, is attempting to stall and mill and do all those things, but it can also take prizes, which is scary, but it might be a little bit more fragile than and harder to play than normal just block lax. But one of the things I find interesting about this is people are talking about stall as being one of the strongest decks going into the next format, and since we were just talking about the Barrel Zard, will have noticed that there was a Squovet in that deck. And one of the things that scares me about just playing normal block lax is if there are, Arceus decks with Bibarel playing Squovet, and if a lot of the Charizards pivot to Charizard Bibarel and they play a Squovet, and Charizard's still like 15-17% of the meta, if all those are now playing a Squovet, normal block lax loses one of its best matchups. It can now only tie at best against the Squovet because you can never fully mill them if you don't have a
Right.
way to get rid of the Squovet. But with the Luxray and the Radiant Charizard and the Chi-Yu and just attacking with the Pidgeot even, there are ways to knock out that Squovet. And then you could mill your opponent's Super Rods and recovery cards so that they couldn't get it back, and then proceed with your stall plan in this sort of deck.
Yeah, definitely. I think next format, like I think everyone's talking about how stall is going to be very strong, but I do guarantee that um, any list that does well will have an answer to the Squovit. It's more of a question what that answer will be for just like the straight block lag stall rather than the Pidgeot, which
Hmm.
already has good answers.
I think another thing to note as we look into next format while we're looking at this top eight is Pidgeot loses even more cards than just normal block lax. They lose the Stormy Mountains. Um, that's really the main one. They lose the Stormy Mountains, whereas Block Lax also loses the Peonia, um, and the Echoing Horn. So they lose maybe some different things, but I think the Stormy Mountains and is a big deal because it's so important to find that Rotom and that Luxray.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Um, yeah, loses the Pidge or the Pidge control also loses the Clara, which I think is like
Mm-hmm.
pretty important in that matchup. Yeah.
So that I think that about wraps up our discussion of the Utrecht Special Event. Some cool decks kind of coming out in at near the end of this format, and it's fun to see what will happen as a result of that in Vancouver here in a couple weeks. But moving on, we will take a look at a tier list from Japan, and then we'll scroll through here and look at a few of the deck archetypes that they are looking at. But currently in Japan, it looks like Charizard is continuing to be a beast, and I don't think anyone's surprised by that. Everyone sort of assumed that Charizard would be the powerhouse of the next format, and it looks like that is the case. Um, but one of the interesting things is we were just talking about control, and control is very good in this format, but Japan isn't seeing it as an S or A tier deck. They've put it down into the B tier here. But that could be a couple of factors. One is that stall isn't normally uh, a heavily played archetype. Even when it's good, it doesn't seem to get a high meta share. And Japan only plays best of one as well, which isn't as great for sort of control archetypes. But yeah, did one of you guys want to talk through a little bit more of this tier list here?
Uh, I cannot see the tier list.
I think I sent. Did I
Or did
not
I
send
miss
you
it?
the link? Um,
Oh, was it the Pokebook one? Sorry about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I
Sorry.
see it. I see it.
Book, yeah.
My bad.
I'll share a few thoughts here as Max is pulling that up. I think to me the biggest question mark is I think that Goldango being only at 2.5% is probably a lot lower than what it's going to end up being. I'm just based off of what I've seen, what the three of us have seen, sort of with some of our testing. I think Goldango is going to be probably an A tier, if I had to guess. But I also haven't done quite as much testing as the rest of you, so I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're pretty high on Goldengo for sure. Um, I think this was like being the very first tournament of that format for Japan. Uh, or the first like big major tournament. I think there
Sure,
city
right.
leagues going on before this one in
Yeah,
this
there
format.
were. Yeah.
There were. Okay. Yeah. So I think like there's still a lot of like finding the meta. Uh, like for me, what I'm looking at is the Lugia, which ended
Hmm.
up winning the whole Champions League. But the question is, how strong of a deck is Lugia? It's like got a pretty high power level if you're able to like get set up. If you get the turn 2 Archeops and you get a Minccino down in your first turn, the deck's like very strong. Um, but the question is, how often are you going to be like setting up? Like if this guy just like had turn 2 Archeops every game, like in his run to the W, uh, it makes sense because
Right. It obviously
uh,
makes sense that he
the
would
deck's
win.
very strong. I think yeah, it's like it's playing Master Ball, which means you're not playing Prime Catcher. Uh, so it's like you're giving up like a big like a powerful card just for the sake of consistency, and maybe if that's enough. then that's pretty cool. So I think for me, I want to know like how popular, how many people are going to play this deck to
Mm-hmm.
EUIC. You know, like there's definitely the Lugia bots love their Lugia, and so I can definitely see this being a very like highly played deck. But I just don't know if I believe in the consistency of the deck to like win another major.
Yeah, yeah,
I would agree with
that's
that.
where I'm kind of at on Lugia. You're right. The Lugia bots love their Lugia, and I will be really curious to see how format defining it is specifically at UIC. Is it? I kind of always think of it as over 10% or under 10%. You know, if it's over 10%, it's like it's 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 very relevant. If it's under 10%, like you might hit it, but you're not preparing for it as much. You know.
Right.
Um, and and the thing about Lugia in this format, just playing at least the list that won the Champions League, is I think it is the least consistent Lugia has ever been, but the strongest Lugia has ever been when it sets up. Like I think it's actually stronger if it can find a way to consistently get the turn two V star for double Archeops. I don't think that there are a lot of decks that Lugia can lose to in this format. The Minccino or the Cinccino is such a strong attacker. The fact that you can just
Yeah.
always hit 330 damage. Lugia itself has always been a pretty good attacker. Um, and the Snorlax as well is a good attacker, as well as a deck like Lugia being able to play Radiant Charizard, which is also another card that we've talked about a lot being good into the next format because of things like Goldango and basic EX decks like Chiampao, Future Box, and Roaring Moon. Um, I just think that the power level is maybe the highest it's ever been. Even though Rainbow Lugia obviously was insane, but Rainbow Lugia was insane because it was both powerful and crazy consistent with Ultra Ball, Quick Ball, and Evo Incense. And I think if this had all of the tools that Rainbow Lugia had, along with this Cinccino, it would be considered the best Lugia has ever been. But
Hmm.
you're right, Max. The consistency scares me, and we haven't found a way to really build it consistently yet. But then there's the argument that I've seen some Japanese players make online is that you don't really need to rely as much on the turn 2 V Star because you can attack with Snorlax and Cinccino for 2 energy on turn 2. So if you got like a double turbo on Snorlax and then a jet energy to the active, if you didn't start it, you can attack on turn 2 and then you can V Star turn 3. But to me, that means you need to bench a second Lugia V in case they boss KO it. And that seems really bad because the whole point of this deck is you want to just go with one V Star and then single prize attackers for the rest of the game. And to have to bench 2 would be, I think, detrimental to your prize trade.
Yeah, I think losing Professor Burnett like really hurt this deck a lot. That was like such an important card. And there's not really a very good substitute for it. So I think I'll be interested to see like if anyone who plays at the UIC like again just if they're able to find a build of Lugia that's more consistent than the build that won Champions League. I do, yeah, I agree. I think it'll be in a good spot, but until that happens, um, I'm a little lower on Lugia than I think I should be for a deck that just won a major tournament like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to scroll down here too because as we go through this article, they do have deck lists for each of these archetypes on the tier list. So I'm actually
Oh,
just
yep. I'm
I'm
seeing
going
that
to
now.
scroll down to the Lugia so we can take a look at a couple of the lists. But yeah, we are seeing in these lists as I click through them, a lot of them are mirroring pretty much the same 60 that we saw from the Champions League winner. But one different one that we do see here is they're playing a 2-2 Cinccino instead, and they do have the Iron Hands in the deck, as well as 2 Earthen Vessels, a Fire Energy, and a Lightning Energy. And that has been something that I think is interesting in the deck. Not even so much just because the Iron Hands is good. Obviously, Iron Hands is good. Um, but the Earthen Vessel just as another way to discard the Archeops and help with that consistency, I think is actually really strong. Like I would almost even consider playing the Earthen Vessel without any basic energy in the deck,
Just for an
just
extra
to
discard
because
card.
the only discard you have There you have four ways to discard. I think Ultra Ball, Professor's Research, Read the Wind, or Serena. And that just doesn't quite feel like enough because Read the Wind is definitely not the way you want to go. Um,
Right.
and research is really hard to play in this deck because you're almost always researching away 2 or 3 energy.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I mean, like you're saying, right? It's you want more of those discard cards, and yet there's just not a lot that fits the bill in the way that you really want it to.
Mm-hmm.
It feels bad putting a card like Earthen Vessel into a deck like Lugia.
Yeah,
The fact that we're even having to discuss it just proves how tough that is.
Yeah.
and it's funny, Tom. I know you were talking about, man, if Evolutionary Roar Meowth was still a card in the format, be busted in this
That
deck.
Yeah.
Right. Now that would be a very different story, right? It's Buddy Poffinable. It's, a single prizer. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just we searched high and low. I put out the call to the wider Discord asking for people to say, are there any basic non-rule box Pokemon that discard cards from your hand like with an ability? And the answer was no, unfortunately. So what we're left with is Professor's Research, Serena, Earthen Vessel, Ultra Ball, and the new Morty supporter could be good as well in Lugia.
Yeah, I think as a one of makes a lot of sense. If you do the Lugia thing and open 5 special energy in your opening hand, you don't really and an Archeops, you don't really want to research it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you can Luminion for Mortys and discard the one Archeops, that's pretty okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think Morty's a pretty reasonable card. I think that will definitely see some play in Lugia, or in my opinion, it should. So I like that.
But from there, I think we'll scroll back up here a little bit and talk about the Future deck. Future was listed as an A-tier deck on the tier list here, and we can take a look at some of these lists. And it's funny because it seems like the format, aside from one of these decks playing Fighting Energy in it and the Future Terrakion, is it Iron Boulder? I can't remember. That is just playing one Fighting Energy, but all of these decks, all 4 of these deck lists here, are just built around that Turbo Iron Hands, going with the 4 electric generators and the Baby Miraidon to power up your Iron Hands, as well as the gift energies to draw more cards when things are knocked out, and the heavy batons to save that energy on your Iron Hands and keep it in play when it's knocked out. But all 4 of these lists kind of make it seem to me that the way that Future is going to be played in this format is all around that Turbo Iron Hands. No more of the Iron Leaves, Iron Moth, Iron Valiant, none of that stuff. It's all about the hands, baby. The hands.
Yeah, I think the issue with that toolbox style future box deck was that it was pretty easy to get your first attacker set up, but then past that it could be kind of awkward if you drew poorly, or if you got Roxanne or Ionode. It's sometimes it can be hard to get that last attacker set up. I know there was that build that I think Mahone was testing with the EXP shares and the Iron Leaves, but I think just using the heavy baton and just focusing Iron Hands is my attacker, I'm just going to use Iron Hands. It's definitely the best attacker of any of the future Pokemon. Just makes a lot of sense. You're just going to chain the energies with the batons. And I actually think, I was thinking about this, how Vacuum maybe will be less played now that Path to the Peak rotated. But if this becomes a popular archetype, I could definitely see a lot of decks keeping a 1 or 2 of Count of Vacuum just to vacuum away a baton and just kind of stop the momentum of this deck.
Yeah,
Max, that's what I was just going to say. Is I think that if decks like this really start going up in the rise, I think the value that Lost Vacuum is going to have. Yes, of course, there's no Path to the Peak, which was one of the most common cards that people were trying to get rid of, utilizing Lost Vacuum. But now the ability to get rid of tool cards might be the only way that some decks are going to be able to stop something like this from running all over them.
Yeah, and then you have the added benefit of like any decks that are playing like Maximum Belt or Hero's Cape,
Right.
like Vacuum's good at getting rid of those too. So
Hmm.
I think, yeah, Lost Vacuum, I think actually, even though Path rotates, I actually think Lost Vacuum is like just as strong as it was
Hmm.
before.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think the thing that's interesting to
especially.
me about these. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. I was just gonna say on the topic of vacuum. I think when you have two of the main A specs in the format being tools where the belt and the cape more played in controlling archetypes, but also being played in Charizard a little bit. I think that there is a debate to be had over whether you want to play Prime Catcher, Maximum Belt, or the Hero's Cape in Charizard. I think all three are good, but when two of maybe the top four, or two of probably the top four uh, A specs are tools, I think that there's an argument to be had that Vacuum is still very good in the format.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think the thing that scares me about this future list here is that, being able to have an Iron Hands hit for 240 with no drawbacks for 3 energy every turn is kind of frightening to me, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of scary. I don't know how else to say it. That just is scary to me.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
In our testing, like the deck is very vulnerable to hand disruption. Like at the end of the game, like it plays the gift energies, but sometimes you just like aren't able to attach a gift energy to the attacker that you're going to
hmm
use.
Yeah.
Um, so
I
yeah, I think it's a very like powerful, like fast and like pretty dang consistent deck. Like it's pretty rare you miss like the turn the turn one accelerating peak going second, and then the turn two amp. It's pretty rare that you miss that. But again, like it's just at the end of the game, like decks that can disrupt your hand can like make it kind of
yeah,
hard to win.
I
yeah.
just feel like there's got to be a way. Like, remember that list, the anti-valiant list that plays the 1/1 bib, right? Like, there's got to be a way you can stuff a 1/1 bib into this list.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's just when you do that, then like you're giving up like having like an extra hands on your bench or an extra crown to boost the damage. So
Yeah.
it's
And
definitely possible.
you're just one of the things that has always scared me about the barrel is just the vulnerability to when your opponent gets a slow start, for them to just buy a turn by bossing the barrel. And then yeah, you get extra energy attachments and all that with this sort of deck, but um, I think when you can lose a turn uh, to just your opponent boss stalling you, I think that can be rough. But you're right, Austin. This
Yeah.
this is scary for some decks. Like I think about like Lost Box. I don't know if it has a ton of great ways to deal with this. But like Goldango, we played some games with Goldango into this, and it seemed fine. You just don't put the Palkia out definitely in this matchup. And Charizard is honestly probably okay into this because if they play the maximum belt, because even from turn one or turn two, if this deck hasn't taken any prize cards, they can still take knockouts on the. First of all, the Iron Crown is weak, I believe, to Dark, so they can always knock that out. Or with the belt, they can always knock out the hands. And so this deck has to go pretty hard into Zard, I think, to overcome that. But then there's things like Lugia. If Lugia is really popular, something like this will completely keep Lugia in check, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely. Um, yeah, I think for me, like the test of whether a deck is a good choice for UIC or just the beginning of this new format is, does it have a good Charizard matchup? I think for me it would be hard to play a deck that didn't have a good Charizard matchup right now, just with how
Yeah.
strong the deck looks and has been doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would not bring a deck to UIC that has less than a 50-50 into Zard, and like a strong 50-50, not like a hope, like I like this deck and I want to say it's 50-50, so I'm going to say it's 50-50. Like
Right.
no, an actual at least 50-50 or better into Zard. Um
Definitely. Well, and this I would imagine feels okay sometimes. I guess I don't know. It depends on Buddy Poffin changes everything.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's just like if Zard does still play vacuum, which I think a lot of the lists have been still playing one, and
Mhm.
they are able to get the KO and get rid of the heavy baton like in the same turn, and then you're low on
They'll be
energy.
fine.
That could be
Yeah.
tough. Yeah. Scrolling back up a little bit here too to look at how Lost Box has evolved into the next format. I think this is one of those decks that I was concerned about because I think losing VIP or losing the ability to get out your Greninjas and your Cramorants early by losing VIP is tough. They've obviously replaced VIP with Buddy Poffin in these lists, but that can only get out your Comfies as well as the Ditto if you choose to play that. But it's interesting that these Lost Box lists kind of have all centralized around Moon and Hands. And obviously they still have the water energy to be able to use Radiant Greninja, which is still very strong. But yeah, it is interesting to me that Lost Box itself has just morphed around Hands and Moon, and that's kind of the way it looks like it's going to be played.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Those are two of the best like basic attackers in the format right now. They kind of like complement each other, you know, like Iron Hands can take care of the small one prizers, Roaring Moon can take care of the big two prizers. So it makes a lot of sense that this deck is seeing some success still. I think a downside for the deck for sure is like the Buddy Poffin is like it's okay in this deck. I don't think it's like amazing, you know. You still have to play like a heavy count of nest balls because the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that the Buddy Poffins can grab is like you said, the Comfies and like the Ditto if you play that, and like Manaphy if you're playing that. Uh, so I don't know. I think this deck really doesn't like seeing Buddy Poffin over Battle VIP Pass. It would definitely still it would definitely still play VIP Pass if it could.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it does really like Prime Catcher. I
Yeah.
think Prime
Yeah.
Catcher is very strong in this deck.
And the
I think
skateboard.
a skateboard very strong in this deck. Air Balloon, I think in the last format was like a pretty strong card
Mm-hmm.
in Lost Box decks. So definitely like seeing that again. And then I think a couple of lists have been running the Crisis Punch, which I think is a really cool card, really strong.
Yeah.
Lets you play basically Radiant Greninja and Radiant Charizard in the same deck.
Crisis Punch got me through top 8 and top 4 of the League Cup this weekend. Won me game
Put in some
3.
work.
Yeah.
Let's
of
go.
Both top 8 and top 4. So, yeah, that definitely is very strong. And like you said, the Prime Catcher, I think, is very good for these Lost Box decks, as well as that skateboard giving the Comfy free retreat, so you don't have to use an energy attachment on Comfy to retreat it. And the other thing to note in some of these lists is they are playing the Iron Bundle. I think that is one thing that has... Another thing Lost Box has lost is Escape Rope, which was sometimes good because people would hide behind something they don't really care about you cramming away or KOing with Cram on turn 1 if you got to 4 in the Lost Zone. But now that Rope is gone, there's no way for you to bring up something that someone's trying to hide behind on the bench. But the Iron Bundle can do that. So let's say you go up against like Goldango and they start Greninja and bench like 1 or 2 Gimme Ghouls, and they're trying to sort of save those Gimme Ghouls on the bench behind that Greninja, which can't be KO'd by Cramorant. You can use the Iron Bundle and just kind of use it as an escape rope, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think Iron Bundle is actually a pretty reasonable card that a lot of decks could maybe look to see. Like losing Rope is a pretty big deal. I know. I think Azul's group played the Iron Bundle to that regional that they played Chi and Pao to. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it was LASC. Yeah.
LASC. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a pretty strong card. It turns your nest ball into a push, which is pretty cool. And then it's like a reloadable escape rope, like off of like Super Rod. So
I think
I'd actually be interested to see that and included maybe some other decks too.
Yeah, I think the other reason it's probably played too is the Flutter main. We saw some Charizard decks even playing the Flutter main, which just completely shut down your Comfies and your Cramorant when they're in the active, obviously, but that's the only time that their abilities matter. And so being able to pop that Iron Bundle on the bench when its ability, the Flutter main only shuts off the active ability, so you can Iron Bundle and then start using your Comfies around the Flutter main.
Right. It's not
It's a cool tech.
Yep. Just scrolling through here, I think that that sort of about does it for some of the Japan decks. Obviously, Chien-Pao is very good. The Prime Catcher plus Canceling Clone is really good for that deck. We see a rise back up in Arceus decks because Maximum Belt is very good for Arceus, allows it to hit one hit KO potential on basic EXs with the Arceus, as well as 330 damage from the Giratina with the maximum belt onto things like Charizard EX. And then we see Stall doing well. We see Giratina still doing okay. Goldengo in there, we already talked about that. We think that could be a higher meta percentage over here than it is in Japan. But I think the last deck that we haven't touched on is that Great Tusk Mill. And that has been something that's been doing pretty well in Japan. And we saw it, I believe, in the top 16 of the Champions League. And so it's been kind of a long time. It's a different sort of control deck, and it's been a long time since we've seen a mill deck do really well. But this Great Tusk seems to be getting it done over there in Japan, and I think everyone was really interested in the list that played the one of Comfy and the Escape board just as extra draw as your opponents start to knock out your Great Tusks.
Yeah, I thought that was a really, really cool include. It made a lot of sense to me that a lot of times your turn would be you'd be like one card away. So just being able to see like 2 extra cards a turn and taking one of them, I'm sure really ups the consistency of the deck. I think overall, I think that if I were to play like that kind of like archetype, like a control or mill deck, I do still think that either Snorlax Stall or the Pidgeot control decks to me seem a little bit stronger. But at the same time, I do think that the Great Tusk Mill probably has like a better Charizard matchup.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely a lot of merit to playing it, and I think there's still like room to improve on some of the lists that we've been seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say that
lists have not been found yet.
Sorry, go ahead, Austin.
Oh, I was going to just say optimal lists have definitely not been found yet. I don't think that sometimes won't happen until halfway through a format.
Yeah. I gotta be honest, I'm a huge downer on Great Tusk Mill. Like, boo, this deck sucks. I don't wanna be a downer on it, but I think Mahone seemed really high on it and tried it like really hard to make it work. And over the course of like 4 or 5 tabletop streams, I watched him like play that deck, and it just was not it. Did not seem to be it.
It also has a terrible control matchup, which is kind of funny. You'd think that it would have a good control matchup, but and when I was testing it, I was control won like every game into it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I feel like the problem with a lot of these mill decks is that I don't know. There's some good recovery that still exists in the format, and so that being able to draw into your your rods, and if you can manage to not get those milled, then that makes things take even longer. And I don't know. It seems like it just can't quite get the job done quick enough a lot of the time.
It's funny you say that though, because that brings to mind one of the cards I'm most scared of next format, which is Eerie. Which you're right. Normally, if you can save those recovery cards in your hand, going into a game against Stall or Mill, that's really good because you're like, okay, now these can't be milled by like a Misfortune Sisters or the Great Tusk. They're in my hand. I'll use them when I need them. And then your opponent hits you with an Eerie, and that just seems so scary to me. Even in decks that aren't control decks, just like your opponent playing a random one of Eerie can ruin your day as a Lost Box player. There goes 2 gates, or your last 2 super rods, or
right. That's
like,
true.
It's just that card scares me.
Yeah, we've been seeing it in like I've been seeing it in Charizard lists. I've been seeing it in Arctina lists. The decks or the card seems like a pretty like reasonable include in like any archetype that can like fit it in there. It's just really strong. Like it's so hard to win games. Like how is Goldengo winning if you area their last 2 superiors or like how yeah. There's a lot of things that that card can do, and it's kind of funny in a deck that wants to play an ancient support every turn. Aries so good that they still included it in the list.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
that's a good point. That is a good point.
Yeah, well, as I pray that I don't face anyone at EUIC playing an Eerie, let's move on past EUIC and take a look at Crimson Haze, which is going to be the next Japanese set that comes out, I believe, March 22nd. So this will be our June set, does anyone remember what our June set is going to be called? Twilight Masquerade?
Something like that, I
Something
think.
like
Yeah.
that. So we won't be seeing these cards until NAIC in June in New Orleans, but we get a sneak peek of them here as they start to come out in Japan. And we had mentioned this Blood Moon Ursaluna EX sort of at the start of the podcast today, and now we get a chance to take a look at it. First of all, before we even talk about what the card does, Blood Moon Ursaluna is so cool. And when I heard that there was a set coming out that was like built around Blood Moon Ursaluna, I was gonna be pissed if the card wasn't good. And turns out the card is busted.
Dude, I was so mad. I was so excited for Walking Wake EX, and then that card sucked. So, yeah, we needed a good one this time around.
So, Blood Moon Ursaluna with the Elder's Technique ability. This Pokemon's Blood Moon attack costs 1 colorless less to use for each prize card your opponent has already taken. And then for 5 colorless energy, Blood Moon does 240 damage, and this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. And it has 260 HP on a basic EX Pokemon.
That's the most HP we've seen on a basic since like tag teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is basically Radiant Charizard. I mean, the read on this from everybody is this is Radiant Charizard if it was colorless and had 260 HP and gave up 2 prizes. It's just Radiant Charizard. The 10 damage actually is slightly relevant. But what's even more relevant is this can be splashed into literally any deck that plays energy. Because you don't have to have the fire energy.
Or doesn't play energy, because if your opponent's down to 1 prize,
it's attacks for free. It's crazy.
That's what I was just going to point out. Yeah. Get an attack for free when your opponent's at 5 prizes, which is just silly.
Yeah.
Something I noticed about the ability text is we've seen a couple different ways that Pokemon's have had their attack cost reduced. Like, we've had the Radiant Charizard, we have Cramorant, we have the Incineroar EX that is coming out in our Temporal Force set. I think this is the first time that the ability specifically states that it only reduces its actual attack, the Blood Moon attack.
Yeah.
So you won't be able to use this for like Crisis Punch.
Yeah, you won't get Crisis Punched by a 260 HP Blood Moon Ursaluna.
That would have been horrifying. So I think that was probably a good thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that I am scared of with this though is, like you said, if you're down to 1 prize card left, it can attack for free. Or just like even the fact that at 2 prize cards left, it can attack, or at 3 prize cards left, sorry, that it can attack for a double turbo energy. I actually think that like with Hero's Cape and like there's like and Penny, there's like a controlling attacking like Ursaluna deck that just seems like it could go crazy.
Yeah.
I was gonna say this card honestly does scare me a little bit. I think I would feel less afraid of it if it had less HP. But the fact that it has 260 HP and is a basic Pokemon is very frightening to me. Mm-hmm. Wait, hold on. Do we lose that Dunsparce, right?
We do. The weakness.
We do. Okay, thank God, because that might be the only way you can deal with this sometimes, is being able to smack it for weakness. But
that's a good point. Fighting type Pokemon have really fallen out of the format.
Since Arceus went down a little bit,
Yeah, so something like this coming back, if this is popular enough, which I see no reason it wouldn't be, definitely could see a resurgence of like splashable fighting attackers.
A little bit of fighting coverage, yeah.
The funny thing
I guess the Slitherwing, can deal with this, right?
No.
It can because of the burn. Because of the burn.
Does it?
Burn does 20. So it does 120 plus... So it does 240 plus 20 for the burn.
Oh, sure.
I thought it did 140. Shoot.
It does 140 when it burns.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I fall into the same trap. I always think it does 140.
That's so bad.
It does 120.
I guess when I look
burn.
at this card, I always like, I think that this card is really strong with like, seems no reason if you're playing this card in your deck to not play like a Bravery Charm or something like that, or if like using your ace spec on like Hero's Cape or something, like that's terrifying. Right. 360 HP like Ursaluna.
Yeah, I also think that
for no energy.
Yeah, I also think a couple other things. One, I think this is a very strong attacker, obviously, very strong HP, all that stuff. There will be decks that build themselves around this card specifically because even as soon as you've taken 2 prizes, right? Something attacking for 3 energy isn't a big deal. We see Roaring Moon attacking, and it can't even do 220 without a stadium in play. Obviously, it has the other attack that can do limitless damage, but it damages itself. But for 3 colorless energy, like a Lost Box deck could go crazy with a Blood Moon Ursaluna. And I think it probably will. But the other thing that I think about this card is, we were promised comeback mechanics in the Scarlet and Violet era, and I actually think that they might be thinking of this card as like one of the first Pokemon that they've printed that's like a comeback mechanic. Like we have Iono, we have Counter Catcher, we have Defiance Belt. But I think this is the first Pokemon being printed that I think they might be seeing as one of those comeback mechanics, where it's like you're down by a lot and any deck can splash this in. So literally, I don't like there could literally be a world where every deck is a 59 card deck plus a Blood Moon Ursaluna because this card is so good, and with the HP that it has and the attack, doing pretty good damage, like basically knocking out any basic EX aside from Blood Moon Ursaluna.
Right.
I think this is a comeback card. If I think the designers would classify it as that.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
I think that's accurate for sure.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting if every deck, if theoretically if every deck played one of these, it hits for 240 and it has 260. So like,
Yeah.
What ways can you use to bump its damage up a little bit? Maybe we'll
Right.
see some other ways.
Yeah, and I the other thing I think we already mentioned this, but I just want to say it again because it's crazy. You can now play Sablezard with Radiant Greninja in the deck, which was like the
Yeah.
worst thing about Sablezard was not having Radiant Greninja because the draw power from Radiant Greninja and the ability of Moonlight Shuriken is what makes Lost Box good, and you sacrifice that in Sablezard for sort of a different game plan, but now you get to do both.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. I'm definitely excited to see where this card goes because I think it has obviously so many dimensions to it that I don't see a lot of limits of where this card can be used, which is unusual. There's not many cards like this that have ever been printed.
Yeah,
I
I think
agree.
this.
To me, this is an easy like 10 out of 10 card.
Yeah.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, and I think it could be one of the reasons. I mean, we've been talking about the next format. This is the next format, but I think Lost Vacuum becomes even more needed if I mean people are going to want to boost this HP even further.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess we kind of mentioned this. We've mentioned Path to the Peak being gone a couple times, but yeah, no Path to the Peak to stop this. Like, there's hardly any ability lock in the format. We'll get to one coming up in a little bit here, but yeah, there's not that many ways to be able to stop its ability.
Yeah. Moving on to the Angry Jigglypuff, the Screamtail EX. Sudden Shriek for colorless energy. You can use this attack only if you go second and only during your first turn. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any supporter cards from their hand. And then Crunch for a psychic, colorless, 120 damage. Then you discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So weirdly, like Screamtail, they made into sort of a controlling card, discarding energy, and on the first turn your opponent, or on the first turn if you use it going second, your opponent can't play a supporter card.
Right.
So it's kind of a controlling EX. I don't necessarily think this will be all that strong, but it is really interesting effect if you're playing like a deck with like jet energies or something that you could get it into the active spot with an energy on it turn one going second. I mean, that is a very powerful effect to disrupt your opponent going into their second turn, and in a lot of cases would keep them from doing a turn two attack. But I'm not sure it's quite good enough.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful text. It's very situational. It seems like, maybe could fit in some kind of like item lock deck. You you turn on your first turn, you shriek them, and then every turn after that, you're item locking them either with the Bayonet or the Venomoth.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we'll see it in something like that. It's hard to say. Like, I feel like this is like one of those cards that like doesn't really seem that impressive, but then somebody's gonna like pull up with the list in it, and everyone's gonna be like, "Oh my god, how did we not realize how broken that is?"
Yeah.
My initial reading of this is the only thing I could think of that would really want to maybe play this would be Max, like you said, some kind of item lock deck. Um, but even then, it's hard for me to fully endorse this for something like that. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe someone's just gonna pull up one day and our jaws are gonna be on the floor,
I mean,
thinking,
it could be the case that if something like Banette or Venomoth wants to be good, since they can't item lock turn one, supporter locking is the best they can do. But even with Salvatore out now, the point of those decks are going to become to item lock turn one anyway. So I don't really see.
Yeah, but I think supporter locking for a turn on for the first turn is stronger than item
Yeah,
locking for the first
yeah,
turn.
that's true. That's true. Moving on to even more lock, ability lock in the Iron Thorns EX. With the ability initialize, while this Pokemon is in the active spot, Pokemon with a rule box in play, except any future Pokemon don't have any abilities. And then its attack lightning colorless bolt cyclone does 140 damage. And you move one energy from this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon. I think that we won't see Future Box in its final form until we get this card. And maybe not even then,
100%.
but like this, I think will be what makes that deck be able to be like a tier A deck more than I think it'll probably be sort of tier B until we get this card.
Yeah, I
I
think
think.
this card's really strong. Go ahead, Austin.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think if there's gonna be any hope for Miraidon coming back as well, I think it's this card. Being able to Miraidon this down, and then you can attach return to it, and then you could adjust the deck so that you play a lot more double turbos. And obviously, with still being able to have Iron Hands in the deck,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really mind having more double turbos, and you still have Mew EX to be able to play around with. And so, um, yes, we're going to be losing Flaffy and everything, but um, maybe we don't need it in a world where
Yeah.
we have cards like this.
The fact that its attack preserves an energy and moves it to your bench, I think, is actually a benefit.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
the funny thing, though, too, is this is one of the only other relevant cards that can use Heavy Baton because it does have 4 retreat.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's true.
it's kind of funny to me because this card is very, very extremely similar to Empoleon V.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the ability's a little different because Empoleon stopped non-rule boxes. This one stops rule boxes, but like
Only
basic,
basic non-rule boxes also.
only basic non-rule boxes.
Yeah,
That's
basic
true.
non-rule.
But it's got like the same like the same,
Yeah.
pretty much the same attack. But this card is like 10 times better than Empoleon.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
I mean,
ever was for sure.
this is the only way in the current format to lock rule box abilities on the bench. Like your opponent can't Pidgeot or use Charizard's Infernal Rain. Like the only other EX ability lock, sorry, non-basic EX ability lock in the format is Fluttermane, and it only locks the active. And then you
Yeah.
have
right.
Klefki, which locks anything basic, but like it
But it
Only
doesn't
locks
stop
basic.
yourself
Pidgeot.
too.
It blocks yourself too. Yeah, and I think that again we talked about Iron Bundle already being like an interesting card. I think in a format where, like you said, Austin, maybe Miraidon, Caesar Resurgence, or Future Box really gets a heavy boost from this, we could see
Yeah.
even more Iron Bundles being played.
Yeah, I think this card's pretty strong, and I think yeah, like you guys were saying, the future doesn't really get unlocked until this card comes out.
Yeah,
For sure.
very cool. Moving on, we have this Applin. I don't think that there's anything super competitively interesting about this, but I don't know a ton about GLC, but I think that this is the first Dragon type Applin. So I think it was a big deal for Dragon type GLC decks.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Flapple and the Appleton are pretty sick, so that's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool for the GLC heads.
And
Um,
this Diplin's pretty cool, especially for GLC. I feel like is very interesting.
yeah.
Boss plus 70.
Oh, you get to choose the active Pokemon. Okay.
You get to choose.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. That is cool. Probably not for standard, but yeah, definitely cool for GLC. We have this Fione or Fione. I don't know how you pronounce it, but I'm a huge Manaphy and Fione fan myself. And I was hoping this card would be good, but it sucks, unfortunately. But we got a cool art. We got a cool art, so
Cool
I'll
art,
take
yeah.
it, I guess.
Definitely good art. Perrin now, which is for those who are playing back in the Sun and Moon days, Pokemon Communication ×2. Pretty interesting.
Seems bad on a supporter.
Yeah, I think it's pretty weak. I don't know. Maybe Lugia's like, maybe Lugia will be like, yeah, can turn these cards into Archeops now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I don't know.
I would have much rather seen this just be Pokemon Communication.
That
Over
I would not have
over
hated seeing Pokemon
Yep.
Communication in
Yeah.
the format.
a very balanced card, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But
But
it is
moving
what
on
it
from
is.
that, we have a reprint of Enhanced Hammer, which I think is just a cool thing to have access to. I don't think it's format breaking. I don't think it's format defining. I don't think it'll be played in a ton of decks, but I think it's just there for certain times and certain situations and certain metas where, there might be decks that can tutor it out that just might play one.
I saw this card and I fell to my knees in distress because I was so excited for Mist Energy and comboing Mist Energy with like Hisui and Gudra V-Star or something like that. So if I want to
Man.
do that, I'll have about one format or one set to do it with until Enhanced Hammer comes back
Yeah.
And
out,
then it's gone.
and then it's
I
gone.
think even
But
then yours
probably
like
good.
still probably okay, but
Yeah, it's probably good for the format, especially if Lugia does end up like being really strong.
being able to get rid of the gift energies so you can
Yeah,
Iono Enhanced Hammer and like still KO the active is good. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things about the current Lugia deck that makes it so strong going into the EUIC format is like you load up a Chinchino and you put a gift energy on there and it's like you can't gust around this Chinchino. Like you
yeah,
have to knock it out.
you have to KO it. Yeah, and like
But you're
it could be a reasonable including
yeah,
like Roaring Moon and stuff too.
yeah, for sure. Then we have Community
Community
Senator. Once during each player's turn, if that player has already played a supporter from their hand, they may heal 10 damage from each of their Pokemon. An interesting card. Um, I I hope that we get a reverse of this, which would be like Shrine of Punishment back for all rule boxes. So you Shrine of Punishment your opponent, and then they play Community Center to heal the damage off. I think that'd be funny.
That would be funny. Yeah, we need something like Shrine of Punishment back. That's gotta happen. Come on, Pokemon.
Back in
do it.
the times when everyone was convinced that Champions Festival was the wave in Gardevoir,
Yeah.
this card would have blown their minds.
It would've.
And now they wouldn't even have it because they have Moonlight
Yeah.
Hill.
Now they have Moonlight Hill.
Yeah. Caretaker though, what are they doing with this?
Yeah, you want to tell us about Caretaker, Austin?
Yeah, you get to draw 2 cards. Then get this, folks. If Community Center is in play, you get to shuffle Caretaker back into your deck.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
This card would be still unplayable, but way better if it said draw 2 more cards.
I know they couldn't even make it draw 3. That's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just don't know what they're thinking.
Well, Caretaker getting shafted again because I thought when I played the DLC for the Teal Mask, this dude like had a main role. Like he was like greeting you when you got to the village. He was like showing you where you were gonna like stay while you were staying in Kitakami. And like the game designers didn't even bother to give him a name. They just called him Caretaker.
He's just Caretaker.
So he got shafted in the game, couldn't even be given a name, and now he can't even be given a good card.
I don't
Yeah,
know, man.
It's kind of interesting because I think we're starting to see a lot of these like supporters, like these draw supporters that have a random effect. We had like before we had like Worker and Bird Keeper, they're all draw 3, and nowadays we're getting like Daisy's Help and like Rourke and Caretaker, they're all draw 2 now. I think it's kind of interesting. Like the draw power of these like random draw supporters are starting to go down.
Draw 3 is too strong, bro.
Yeah, it used to be draw 4 was like the forbidden. And now, yeah, you're right. Maybe they're taking away the draw 3s. Although, is there a chance? Is there a chance? I know that there probably isn't because we just saw a 260 HP Ursaluna basic and we have all the ancient and future stuff. But maybe there's a chance that, like, in some ways they're trying to slow the format down. I don't know.
Here's what I'll say about Caretaker is that eventually, once things like Silene and Pidgeot V and all that stuff is gone, this will technically be a way that you can forever never deck yourself out.
The busted infinite.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, if you have two
Because you draw two
caretakers.
cards,
Yeah.
then if community center's in play, you shuffle it back into your deck.
Oh, well, they have to. If your opponent bumps your stadium, you're cooked.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
but
4 community center.
if you can always just get back, you always can get back the community center. You know,
Yeah,
you'll
but
be able to loop trainers into your hand somehow. I'm sure they'll print something.
True, true. Um, Moving on though, we have Lucky Helmet. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is in the active spot and is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, even if it is knocked out, draw 2 cards. I mean, this has been printed before. It wasn't very good, I don't think. It's kind of, I mean, it's not good, but like if you were to have something that isn't like easily one-shottable, so when your opponent two-shots it, like you get to draw 4 cards. That's like interesting. I just don't think it's ever going to be good enough.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
fine.
it's not too good. I don't think. Maybe with that Machamp, that Mills, like
Yeah.
eat the hit, and then you get to that's your draw engine. I don't know. I don't see very much uses for Lucky Helmet.
Yeah. But we have another ace spec revealed, and
Oh
that is
boy.
the Unfair Stamp. You can play this card only if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Each player shuffles their hand into their deck, then you draw 5 cards, and your opponent draws 2 cards. Austin, tell me what you think about Unfair Stamp.
Oh, so here's the deal about this card: is you can play it on your own turn too. Theoretically, your opponent, like if you're playing against something that's really aggressive, you could unfair stamp while they have 5 prizes.
Yeah,
Which
like
is
they
kind of
cram
wild.
spit for a KO.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, guess what? I have it. Like, and then you like basically are Roxanning, except you still get to play a supporter for turn. So, I feel I just have I feel really unsure about this card. I think it's obviously very powerful. Thank God that they put this restriction that you can only play it if something was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Everyone has, we all remember the days of like Let Loose and all that stuff. So, but it feels a little bit like that to me,
Yeah.
and so I'm nervous about it. I mean, it's obviously a very good card. You're gonna have to, choose to not play. Um, the cape. You're gonna have to choose not to play. The you pick escape rope.
The Prime Catcher.
Prime catcher. Thank you. But this is very obviously a strong card.
I saw a tier 4 video that utilized this card. It was a Darkrai V-Star build of Arbok EX, and it was the funniest thing I had ever seen because like the other guy took a
Oh
KO.
no!
The other guy took a KO, and then he gets reset stamped. His B barrel gets counter catchered, and then he gets Arbok KO'd, so he's down to 0 cards in hand, right? And then the game goes on. He like takes another knockout. V star for unfair stamp, and do it all again.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I think it is
Yeah.
I think it is crazy. I yeah, I think you're right, Austin. This card makes me nervous, like not that it's going to break the format, but you just have to play cautiously, I think. Like you said, Max, you could get into a situation where they reset stamp you or unfair stamp you on the turn, they counter catch up your barrel and knock it out. But I think it does make some decks, one, it makes a deck having built-in draw power even stronger in a format with unfair stamp. So something like Goldengo, decks that play Barrel and Radiant Greninja and all that sort of stuff, and Curlia's, just having that inbuilt draw power into your deck is going to be even stronger. So decks like Miraidon are going to be pretty scared of this card, or more scared of this card than other decks, I think. But it also might make you think as like if you can take a turn 1 knockout, it might make some decks think twice about that.
Definitely. You like maybe want to start establishing your board a little bit more. if this card,
Mm-hmm.
shows up. I think this card has, I could be wrong. I could eat my words on this, but I think this could have a strong argument to be the best ace spec in the format. I think obviously Prime Catcher is very, very strong. It probably will be the best ace spec in the format, but Unfair Stamp to me seems extremely, extremely strong if you can, figure out a way to
Yeah.
consistently like gust their draw.
Yeah. That's true. I think one of the things that I am a little hesitant on, well, not hesitant, it's obviously very good, but um, if your opponent just draws research, like you did nothing to them, right?
For sure.
And so something like Prime Catcher is a bit more proactive, where you're gusting something, getting this really powerful effect off on your turn, and like the effect resolves by the end of your turn. Whereas you're playing this card and you are disrupting your opponent, and obviously that's very strong, and this is a very strong sort of disruption, especially on an item, and it draws you a new hand of cards, like up to five, all good things. Um, but it's also you wasted your ace spec probably if your opponent drew into research.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Or you just win the game because they didn't.
Yeah, could be. But like again, if they have a barrel, if they have there's ways that decks can draw out of it, and so it's not. It's I don't think it's like. I think it's strong, and I think it's easily in the top three strongest effects on an ace spec right now. Um, I and you're right, Austin. There's games where you're gonna get unfair stamped like turn 2 or 3, and the game's over from there because you just are top decking for the rest of the game, hoping for something.
Right.
But there's also going to be games where your opponent or you waste your unfair stamp because your opponent just drew the nuts off too.
To your point, this card does not beat Tuba Barrels.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't beat Tuba Barrels. That's true. It
Yeah,
does beat one with a boss KO though.
Yeah. That's
Boss
why.
counter
Yeah,
kit.
that's true. I just do like I like a spec that is more proactive, where maximum belt you're getting the value of it on your turn, and prime catcher you're getting the value of it on your turn. Whereas this, you're hoping you're getting value out of it in terms of it draws you a new hand, and then you like it's a draw power on an item, technically, which is good, and then you can still play a supporter on top of this, and it disrupts your opponent at the same time, which is very good. But you're not getting value out of it on your turn as much as you're getting value out of it on your opponent's turn when they draw pass, or hopefully draw pass, Whereas Prime Catcher and Maximum Belt, you're getting the value right when you play it and attack with it or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess part of what I'm thinking with this card is like, even if the part where it says each player shuffles their hand into deck, even if it was just you shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 5, like this card would still be worth considering in a lot of decks. Being able to shuffle draw 5 on an item is pretty ludicrous.
Yeah. I also think just like the more of these ace specs we get that are just very powerful, Prime Catcher, and this specifically, and even the Awakening Drum for Ancient Box decks is just very good draw power on an item card. Silene just keeps becoming a better and better card. Just the ability to recycle these ace specs is amazing.
Yeah, and I think, we've been seeing a lot of decks splash in like a 1/1 Palkia line to like power up Greninja. Maybe in like a similar vein, we could start seeing some decks splash in like a 1/1 Darkrai V-Star line just to like double up on your ace spec.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's possible.
But that about does it for Crimson Haze cards here today. Anything else that you guys wanted to discuss on the podcast today on our glorious return to the Zero Lab?
Yeah, man, I'm just happy to be back. It's been a really busy year, I think, for all of us. So I'm glad we were able to get things going again. I'm excited to record some more episodes. Maybe it's some more content too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm feeling excited that we're back, and it's good to talk about this stuff. And maybe you could tell that I was seeing some of these cards for the very first time. Cringe, but always fun to take a look to see what is on the horizon. So Good,
Yeah,
good to be doing it.
absolutely. So hopefully some cool things in the future, like Max said, with more content here on Zero Lab. Um, but definitely you can look forward to weekly episodes going forward again here as we get back into the podcast. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and tune in next week. We'll be doing weekly episodes again here on Zero Lab.
We'll see you soon.